to the impeachment trial now in the US, and Republicans do appear to be increasingly confident they'll be able to withhold the Democratic push for witnesses to be able to be called in this trial. Joining me now for more on this is Simon Jackman, CEO of the US Studies Centre. Simon, thanks very much for your time. This is one of the crucial aspects the Democrats are pushing for. Just explain to us too, we've got this handful of Republican senators. They've got a bit of their own pressure because of the nature of politics in their state. Not to be too friendly towards Trump, but the party wants to make sure they don't actually help the Democrats out here with calling new witnesses.
Yeah, and that's exactly the issue. Look, you've got senators sitting in so-called purple states, some of whom are up for re-election this November, right? 1/3 of the US Senate is up on every 2 years, a 6-year term, so every 2 years about 1/3 is up. And some of those are in purple states, and they're under some enormous pressure, as you just described. And it's this, it's a statement about the way the American system works.
Yeah.
The parties have gotten stronger over there over time. They're not quite as strong as parties as we know them in parliamentary systems. But on key votes and at key moments, and this is certainly one of them, do I go with my party or do I track a little closer to where I think my home state, my voters are? And that is the bind that a key number of Republican senators are facing right now.
How does that, I mean, even if whatever they do here, they're going to go to the next election with Donald Trump as the leader, as the president. So presumably that hurts them anyway. If that's part of their equation, they figure they may as well not anger the party too much.
Well, but it's interesting, right? If you're in a state where Trump's approval rating, nationwide, Trump's approval rating's in the low 40s.
Yeah.
If you're in a state where that's in the high 30s, how close to that guy do you want to be in a general election context? Particularly if the Democrats, who can smell blood in the water, have put up a really good challenger against you. A very popular local politician from your home state. And so now you're dragged between Mitch McConnell yanking on your ear on one side to hew the line in DC, and there are lots of tools at his disposal, or do you go and with an eye to that re-election contest? And over American history, the answers tended to be you go where your home district is taking you, because constitutionally and just the way the American system with separation of powers is set up, at the end of the day, that incentive to go with my re-election prospects outweighs loyalty to my party.
Which is one thing we see in politics across the world, I suppose, that survival instinct. Well, look, that's one part to keep an eye on, as the vote for that will happen, I think, in a couple of days' time on new witnesses. But the John Bolton books caused a real splash. Now it claimed there are classified parts of the book that will never be released. Presumably, that would not include the quid pro quo and so on, the Trump-Ukraine stuff. I mean, that's already out in the public, or is there a push to say, well, hang on, we can't officially release this stuff either?
Yeah, the latter. And indeed, in the trial today, keeping it on in the background from early morning Australia time, it's become part of the debate between the two sides in the impeachment trial itself. What parts of the book are admissible? What's the process? Now, when you leave government service and you want to do a book, it is traditional, in fact it's by law, that the government the administration gets a review of the manuscript to check for any classified details that may be finding their way into print inadvertently or whateverly. But in any event, that is now itself, that process of review has now itself become politicised and in the crosshairs of everything that's going on in the Senate trial, because a lot of people expect that if Bolton were to testify, it's pretty clear he'd have something pretty damning to say about Trump's behaviour in this whole Ukraine episode. But I've got to say, the flip side of Bolton, is a wild card there. What would he say in response to questions about what Biden and Hunter Biden were doing in Ukraine? So some danger for both sides if Bolton ever got to the floor, in my view.
That's a good point, and yet Donald Trump's tweets, so he's trying to get on the front foot there about saying what we're hearing, the leaks out of John Bolton's book, are not accurate. I want to turn to the Democrats in the Iowa primaries as well, Simon. I want to talk Pete Buttigieg. Look, he was once leading Iowa. He's in this interesting situation where all his rivals are sort of tied up in impeachment processes. So he's going the Obama path. He's talking about hope everywhere he goes now. How's this going to work for him?
Yeah, it's interesting. Biden is also liberated from the Senate at the moment. He's not in the Senate. He's out there in the field, but Warren and Sanders are. So Buttigieg, you know, the history of Iowa caucuses is littered with poll leaders in December fading come January, or in some years when the caucuses are as late as February. Buttigieg does appear to be, and Warren to some extent appears to be, that sort of a candidate. It's a really interesting it is the kind of contest, an out of left field sort of contest a la Obama, and clearly, you know, I can understand the rationale for trying to latch onto that rhetoric and pull together those votes. It's really interesting, though, the back and forth between the campaigns on Buttigieg. You know, will he needs to do well in a state like Iowa, because I doubt he's going to do particularly well in a New Hampshire, and as all bets are that he will struggle in an African-American heavier state like South Carolina. So if he wants to break through, you know, an outsider like him has to catch fire a little bit, or beat expectations in Iowa. So he's sort of not going to leave anything out there on the field, you know what I mean? He's going to swing really hard in this first contest.
Look, this will sound old-fashioned, but what about, you know, it's a conservative country, America, for the most part. You've got someone running for president who's gay. Is that going to be a factor?
Interesting in the general that you raise it, yeah. In the Democratic primary, though, right, it's a real sort of mark of distinction and a calling card, something to really rally behind. Just as voting for the first African-American candidate, a la Obama, had this historical significance, mobilised a lot of people. So, but you're right, I think come the general, delicate politics, how you make an issue of that. If he were the nominee, I don't think he will be, so I think it's kind of a moot point. But it is a real live question. And look, the other thing, Tom, is you just keep coming back. I keep coming back to these swing state head-to-head matchups. There's one candidate the Democrats have that reliably beats Trump in head-to-head matchups in the must-win states, and that's Joe Biden, right? And for all the reasons you just mentioned, Buttigieg struggles, Bernie Sanders struggles, too far to the left for the general election constituency, and that's why, back to the impeachment trial, this focus on Biden is just so fascinating. The idea that we're having this discussion about Biden in the Senate literally 2 or 3 days before the First in the Nation caucus, where it's a Biden versus Sanders contest at the top right now. Unprecedented in American political history.
Of which we're used to saying. Just finally, I'm interested in to what extent Democrats might play on this massive deficit, more than $1 trillion that's going to be run. I mean, we're talking back of an envelope stuff, $80 billion or so, if that were Australia's budget. You can imagine all the talk there. Donald Trump once spoke about, you know, let's stop getting into so much debt. We know he's delivered on some election promises in a big way. This one's a clear failure. Is it getting a run, or is this just yesterday's news?
It may be tomorrow's news. Could well expect this to come up in the general. Keep an eye out for two things. The talk of more tax cuts, a nice little dose of sugar for the American middle class, say, in the late American summer. More reasons to support Trump. But it's the ad I would cut if I were a Democratic consultant are all the Republicans talking about, you know, fiscal rectitude. They're you know, arguing the case for small deficits and small government. That is not the Trump legacy in the way that so many Republicans have forsaken that tradition of republicanism and gone with the Trump program. The hypocrisy there, to be blunt about it, is pretty breathtaking. It's hard to imagine, though, if middle class tax cuts, it's very hard for a Democrat to argue against that, though. So keep an eye on that one down the road. But right now it's being just blasted out of the water by the impeachment business. Maybe there's a big, scary debt clock on the horizon. Simon Jackman, always appreciate your thoughts. Thank you.